something or I listen to something or read something, I generally stay away from a lot of reviews to not skew my thing of it. I'll eventually go and see what other people thought about it, but I don't really care what all of y'all think all the time. So, I've sat with, I care about some people I'll talk to hip hop about on this stuff. So Brian's texting me, I cared what Brian had to say. Don't necessarily care about everybody else. My boy's a big Nas fan. He hit me up. We talked about it. Um, a lot of the early reaction to this was overwhelmingly positive. Um, from what I've seen, the little bit I've seen on Twitter, the little bit some people have commented to me on certain tracks. Um, Very interesting. And I will preface our conversation by saying this, to be completely honest. When Nas announced this the week before it dropped, I saw it was King's Disease 2, and I'm like, all right, cool. Nas had a great job with Hit Boy in the first one. I am very wary of sequels in terms of movies, books, especially when it comes to albums in terms of hip hop. Most sequels in hip hop, they're goddamn usually not good, or they're very underwhelming compared to the first, right? Like this happens where it just won't live up to the expectation of the first. I kind of wish we'd probably get away in hip hop from doing the ones, the twos, the threes, but people do it. It's whatever. For example, Blueprint, one of the best hip hop albums of all time. Blueprint 2, good album, by no means whack. Probably shouldn't have been a double disc like Nas the Street's Disciple, but it's not the Blueprint, right? Like it's not. So I have this worry going into King's Disease with this. With that being said, listen to King's Disease. Uh, Full transparency, my first reaction to it was like, this is good. I like the second half of the album a lot better than the first. I technically still feel that way, although there were songs in the beginning of the album that have grown on me a bit that I didn't like at first, that have now grown on me some more. So overall, I felt like it was pretty comprehensive. Brian, what was your reaction? First listen, and I'm assuming you've sat through and listened to this. I've listened through it in its entirety 5 times through already. So it's had 5 listens. I'm assuming you've probably listened to about the same. But talk to the people about what your first reaction was, and then how you're feeling sitting with it a little bit longer. King's Disease 2.
I've probably done the album front to back about 5 or 6 times. But there are certain songs I've definitely played more than others in repeating them. One of them being Death Row East, which we talked a little bit about through text, but we'll get to that in a second. I want to point out the reviews, the early reviews, because you did say that you stay away from that.
Yeah, I
Uh,
haven't read any.
I was on the Twitter streets, just sort of, surveying what the reaction is out of intrigue or whatever. And a bunch of people that I follow were talking about the album as it came out. I had my own decisions, and I feel like I do a pretty good job of not letting people influence me in that way. So I was looking at what people were saying to compare it to last year. And I remember last year there were some nerves. Nas Hit Boy, this is kind of weird. Is this going to work? Whatever the case may be. And while many of the reactions were positive, there were some mixed. Like the album is mid. There were some less than favorable reviews from some of the outlets that cover music, like Pitchfork and the Rolling Stone in particular, had 2 reviews on it that weren't as good, both of which we disagreed with up here vehemently. The Rolling Stone dude, I forget the writer's name, but he got really mercilessly clowned on Twitter after that. And the critical reviews early on for this are, as you said, overwhelmingly positive. I would say because I think this sort of happens, right? Like you don't really like sequels, but generally speaking, but a lot of people seem to like sequels and or just the idea of, okay, now we're comfortable with the Nas and Hit Boy sound, so now we're gonna like this album immediately or more immediately than we did last year. I think a lot of people have that sort of thought because in the early reviews, the Metacritic average, which for King's Disease is in the low 70s, for King's Disease 2 is 96. Now that's not going to sustain itself because you're still waiting on reviews from like Hip Hop DX, Pitchfork, and some of the other ones. But in terms of like the review standpoint, the Independent gave it a 5 out of 5.
Wow.
NME, yeah, NME New Musical Express, which is also from Britain, gave it a 5 out of 5. Clash was 7 out of 10. The Line of Best Fit, I actually don't know what that is, but they're a London-based organization, 9 out of 10. And Exclaim gave it an 8 out of 10. The Metacritic is a 96. I am not picking up that phone. So basically, when it comes to the Nas album, for me, I think that all of that is well and good. I just also think that 96 is kind of high because you're literally talking about Illmatic. I don't know what you have to say about that before I get deeper into my review
Yeah,
of it.
yeah. I mean, yes, I do think it's kind of high, and I will say I do like Metacritic as a means of looking at stuff because I love what Metacritic does in taking all these different reviews and averaging. So I do look for a lot of stuff when I'm on the fence about something or I don't know if I should listen to something or watch something. I'll go to Metacritic and be like, "Yo, especially if it's been out for some time, what's the average?" Or I generally go back and look at stuff like, "Hey, I thought this was really good. How did it get reviewed across the board?" Over time, I'll do that. Yeah, 96 is probably high. You're talking about that's exceptionally great album territory, right? We're talking like masterpiece albums here. I do not think this is in that stratosphere of albums. I just don't think it's there. I think it's good. I do want to say something, B, to what you said about sequels and why you think people generally like them and they get used to a sound. Because I actually think that's a really good point. And I think there's something that should be differentiated with King's Disease 2 to some of the other sequels I would have mentioned, whether it's like Blueprint 2 or Only Built for Cuban Links 2 or whatever 2 in hip
Yeah,
hop,
because this
the
is
Carter
this.
2.
Yeah, because this is one artist, one producer.
That's the difference
Yeah.
here, right? And I think that's where you get used to something being a little bit better sonically, is because this is one artist, one producer. I do think there's something you said about people getting comfortable with the sound. I wasn't really worried about the Nas and Hit Boy sound even before King's Disease 1. Wasn't really a concern for me. I thought it was interesting, refreshing to see Nas work with one producer. I think it's also refreshing to see that they had the chemistry and were still able to do it again here on this album. That's good to see. Um, and I'll let you continue. I'll get more into my thoughts, on the album, standout tracks, and of that so far. But yeah, I think it's a really good album. I will say initially I had it about a 7 out of 10. That's what one of the reviews Bryan mentioned it said. And upon now I've sat with it more. I'm kind of solidly at an 8 out of 10. I think it's a very good album. 8 out of 10 is really good. It's a really good body of work. I would have liked the album to be a little bit tighter. It is 15 tracks. I probably would have tightened it down. I know early on I told Bryan I'd probably take off 5 tracks. I've come down on that. I'd probably get rid of 2 or 3. Maybe if it got it down to 13 or 12, would have liked that a little bit better. But no, it's a really good project. And you should be impressed by the fact Nas and Hit Boy have shown such good chemistry once again. It almost I generally don't say this. I rarely ever say this about anything. King's Disease 3? Why not? Right? Like, why not here? I mean, the chemistry has been really good. And I think when you get these in hip hop with a rapper and producer with such good chemistry, you want more of that, even if the album title's different or whatever. But I think it is a good thing that there aren't too many cooks in the kitchen on these last 2 Nas albums. It's just been Hit Boy and him. They've locked in, they've made really good songs. Nas has had stuff to say. I don't think thematically King's Disease 2, we'll get into which one we think is better, is nearly as tight or the same as KD1, but yo, man, it's a dope project. I'm definitely enjoying it. And I can't say I'm happy to see that it's getting critical acclaim. Don't think it's quite as good as some people or other people are saying, but it's definitely damn good.
Well, I'm glad it's getting critical acclaim because we've talked about this. Nas is just left out of a lot of hip hop conversations, which is ridiculous. Like, because that's fucking Nas at the end of the day. And like, you'll just hear somebody name like just dudes in any sort of conversation at the best at whatever, and then you'll always hear Jay, you'll always hear like certain other people, you'll hear a lot of Andre 3000, and for some reason people just sort of leave Nas off as if he isn't on their mind in whatever the conversation is, but
See, that hasn't been my experience. That
he's
really hasn't been that
he's
people
one of
leave him
those that
out.
should be in every conversation, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, you'll see like rankings for the best albums from 2012, and then Life is Good is not there. You'll see stuff from like the best albums from 2001, and still Matic is lower than it should be, etc., etc. Going back to it, even last year with King's Disease, I don't think that last year King's Disease got the album love that it should have, because people were excited about other projects that weren't nearly as good. And I think this year with King's Disease 2, I think more people are actually gonna show him some respect. on what this was. Was it better than King's Disease 2? I don't know, but I feel like this is one that's going to get more critical love as we've already seen early on. Now, going into it, um, I had slight reservations because this felt like a quick turnaround. I thought that Nas was gonna like just he dropped a Spotify single, he dropped EPMD. I thought he was gonna maybe take the year off from doing a larger project, but evidently him and Hit Boy recorded a lot of stuff whenever they had those recording sessions, and probably they added on more, but they spent a lot of time around each other. And maybe because of COVID, he's just had more time to record and has had more stuff on his mind that he's wanted to say. So all power to him. I thought that this could have been, I was even surprised that it was 15 songs because I thought that it could have been easy like 10 or 12 or whatever, as you mentioned. But like, there's only a couple songs that I probably would take exception to. But I mean, most of the album I thought was really good. And as I kept hearing it, like my first instincts were like, okay, this is going to be one of the best albums of 2021. We're going to be talking about it in our end of the year episode for albums of the year. Most definitely, I believe that it's gonna probably be in both of our top tens because it's that good. I don't know where. I'm not saying it's gonna be number one like King's Disease was last year, but right now there ain't a lot of competition because you're talking about like J. Cole and Coda the Fiend, and you ain't talking about like much other than that. Isaiah Rashad just dropped. You and I haven't really gone too in depth in that yet, so we'll
Yeah,
see.
I listened to a few tracks on that yesterday. No, I'm not to say. I was doing some cleaning. My nephew, I turned it on. It was
And then you turn it off.
yeah. Well, I actually decided to go play Sylvia demo, so that might say a lot about it. So there we go.
I'll give it a spin at some point. But going through, the track list, like I think King's Disease 1 and what I really like about King's Disease 1 was sequenced like damn near perfectly, right?
Do you think? Let's get to this part of it. Do you think it's better? Do you think what do you think is a better album? Is King Disease the original or King's Disease 2? There's a lot of talk out there. I've had somebody message me that thinks it's better than the original. Do you think this album, King's Disease 2, is better than King's Disease 1?
I've seen a lot of people say that 2 was better, and I think that's because we're just like instinctively scared at giving the first of anything props. The first person to do whatever, the first like whatever it is, we're just scared to do that. Like I always use the example about TV shows. People don't really get on it until people start talking about the second season. And then it's like, okay, now let's start watching Top Boy, let's start watching Rami, whatever the case may be. Let's start watching, Power, whatever it is. So I think that for a lot of people, they think 2 is better because they're scared to say that the first are better. I haven't even seen a lot of hipster takes about whether or not. I mean, like, yo, nah, 1 is better, whatever. Fuck that. It was the OG one. I haven't really seen a lot of that shit. For me, I hesitate to say 2 is better than 1. I do think it's closer than what I thought initially. I think it's a lot closer than what I thought initially, and
It's
I think
closer. It's closer to me than most sequel albums. I will say that it's closer than most
I
sequel
think
albums.
I think there could be a world where I sit with this longer, and by the end of the year, I'm like, 2 might be a little better than 1, maybe, but I don't know. I wouldn't call that the favorite if we're using like betting odds or some shit like that. And I think that 2 also has the single best song between both projects, and that is the second song on the album, and that is Death Row East. That is the best song on either King's
See,
Disease project. It has the most exceptional performance, the flow, the lyrics, the storytelling, the beat, like just all that combined into one. That's gonna be a song of the year contender for me. Death Row East is that good.
I see. I agree. I will agree that King's Disease 2 probably has songs that are better than songs on King's Disease 1. There's probably a handful of them actually for me. It's funny, you said Death Will Each, which I like a lot. For me, that song is, to me, the standout track in this album is Nobody with Lauryn Hill. I think it's a standout
That's
track.
another one. Yeah.
Um, I want to talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
So when I saw this track list, anybody knows me who's watched the podcast, you've seen me on here. I've had the Miseducation Lauryn Hill t-shirt, rocked it on the show. It's one of my favorite albums. I love Miss Lauryn Hill. I've seen Miss Lauryn Hill live. Yes, she was late. Because that's what happens when you see Lauryn Hill live. And as Michael Grady once told us about the story about that on his podcast. And I did not know what to expect from that. When I saw the track list, of course I'm excited. Anytime we get some music now from Lauryn, because she's kind of been out there, You excited? I did not think she was going to rap. I thought this was going to be a hook. I thought this was going to be If I Ruled the World Part 2 in a way, maybe, right?
She rapped.
She rapped. And we haven't heard bars from Miss Hill in years. New bars on the studio track, at least. Man, it was good. Man, it was good. She still sounded great with the flow. She had a great line about, she's out here saving souls and y'all care about my lateness, which is definitely sure to touch, anger a lot of people who were mad that she was late to her shows. But like, I still like the bar anyway. Whatever. No, I really like the song. Also, shout out to Nas for shouting out Grenada in the song. We like that. And no, I think the song is just fantastic. I found myself playing it over and over. There is a stretch on this album, tracks 7 to 9, from Store Run to Moments to Nobody, that I just love. I think it's a great three tracks, 3 track stretch on the album that's just fantastic. But they're really good. I think those songs are probably better, and you could add Death Row East to that. Probably you're right, Bryan, better than anything on King's Disease 1. I disagree with Bryan's other point that King's Disease 1 is better sequenced and tighter, and I think it's a better, more complete body of work, while King's Disease 2 might have songs that actually are better than on King's Disease 1. And I value the tightness and the cohesiveness into an album. So I'm going to take KD1 over 2. But you're right, Bryan. Maybe you got to sit with these things more. Some of the reactions to this stuff is recency bias, how you feel in the moment. But look, right now, as Bryan said, this is an album that you should listen to if you have not. It's absolutely worthy of bumping a bunch of times.
Yeah.
It feels like it has some strong replay value, even in terms of sonically, very production. We even hear Nas over a trap sounding beat on 40 side.
That's one thing I
some
want.
future vocals.
That's one thing I wanted to point out, because like I had texted you that I think the night the album dropped, maybe I was like on it that quickly, where I was like, I think Hit Boy did a better job in terms of production, or I just prefer these beats than King's Disease 1 by a very slim margin. There are beats on King's Disease 1 that I love. I love Blue Benz. I love Car 85. I mean, those two are, you could argue those two are the best beats out of this entire, sort of King's Disease experience. 27 Summers.
27 Summers.
Oh
Crazy.
my God. I love that one. But like I love that Hit Boy, really, and we need to talk about Hit Boy briefly, but what he's done in terms of getting the most out of Nas, you know what I mean? Like, of all people, like really figuring out what sound to use, when to use certain things, how to sort of let him breathe and let him get comfortable and really just get the most out of him and lock in with him in that way. Like, he's really been excellent at just laying down these tracks. He even had a verse on this album, which I enjoyed, on a song called Composer. For
Yep.
people who don't know, like Hit Boy, yeah, he raps also, just not very frequently, and did, I think, more so early on. But doing all these things, like Hit Boy he's making another run at Producer of the Year. Last year was him easily. It was a runaway. It wasn't even close. The album
I
of the
agree.
year race, was probably a little bit tighter, but he did this. He did the Benny project. I want to hear that Nas and Benny song. I thought that there was a chance that could have been on here, but it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. Hopefully, maybe it's
King's Disease 3.
yeah, maybe King's Disease 3, or maybe Benny is gonna, put it out on whatever project he puts out next. Either way, we want to hear it. But like Hit Boy, he's nailed it. Like, I love his spin on the boom bap sound and modernizing it in a way that has Nas sounding fresh, sounding modern, not sounding like he's out of place. Even on some of the trap songs, like on Spicy, it's like if you're putting a trap beat under Nas vocals, yes, you want it to be something like Spicy. I think he did it again with 40 Side,
40 Side, which is dope.
YKTV, which is a song that I was nervous about when I saw it, because I know what YKTV stands for, and I was like, all right, I'm hoping that Nas doesn't sound like the old guy in the club. You know what I'm saying?
Trying to be on the vibes tip, right?
Yeah. But it worked.